I'm 100 miles from Billings, Montana on my way back, and I wanted to talk about voting. Primary ballots are in the mail. If you got a ballot in the mail, you should vote, unless, of course, you're not a U.S. citizen. And then if you got a ballot in the mail, that's a mistake, and you should tell your local auditor's office. You don't need that. But voting's important. Years ago, I had a client from New Zealand, or rather Australia, named Audrey. And Audrey had done one bad thing in her life, she said, which was she forgot to vote, and the state or the federal government fined her, because in Australia it's compulsory. You must vote if you are a citizen. Isn't that great? I think that would be great here. But we don't need to do anything to make that harder for anyone. The president and certain people on the conservative side are pushing the SAVE Act, which would change a lot of things about voting, and it would make it impossible for people who have been living here for years and just don't have a real ID. It would make it impossible for them to vote. I encountered somebody on my trip recently who would be one of those people who couldn't vote if this passed. She's in her 60s, has lived here her whole life, has not traveled outside the country, and so she doesn't have what? A passport. She doesn't have a real ID. Of course she's a U.S. citizen. She's born here, lived her whole life here. Nobody disputes that she's a U.S. citizen. So why does somebody like that have to get a passport in order to prove that they are a citizen who's been here their whole life? It's ridiculous. That's one of the things that the SAVE Act would mandate. Now, many people who watch this will think, well, I don't care about that. It doesn't apply to me. But there are a lot of people like my friend who wouldn't be able to vote if those changes went into effect. And that's really not fair. That's very angering that you've been here for many years, and you've been voting, and now you have to get something new. Why is that? You shouldn't have to. The changes that are proposed in the SAVE Act are major, and we don't need them. The president and people who are pushing for that know that it's not necessary. They can say that there's fraud, but really show us. Nobody has ever shown us anything. The people who have been gotten in trouble and been prosecuted for voting shenanigans are people on the conservative side. Why are they messing with things? Anyway, do vote this week in the primaries. Do vote in November. It's very important. And mind your own business about that. If somebody asks you about the SAVE Act, don't support it. If your legislator is needing your opinion, and they do, about the SAVE Act, tell them no way. You don't want that to happen. Thanks.